All right, we should be good to go now. All right, I'll do the intro and we'll get right into it.
All right.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It is Frank Sriracha Jr. here with another map tour. This time we're on Divided Oasis, made by the one and only Dutchy. Dutchy's on the line. Dutchy, please say hello.
Hey, everybody.
All right, so right off the bat, we've finally got another beach-themed map. I'm a huge fan. I loved Lost Isle, or that one. What was that very first one? That huge
Isle
map.
of Dread.
Isle of Dread, not Lost Isle. Isle of Dread. Isle of Dread. I'll never forget. Some of my favorite matches were played on that map. But yeah. So you went with another beach theme. Is it just like cooler assets that are available to you, or like what kind of gave you the idea for this this like kind of a, not wet, but it's very like a sandy tropical kind of a thing going on?
Yeah, so I think I'm like you. I really like the aesthetic of Isle of Dread. There's just something relaxing when you start a game and you get the nice beachy sand and some nice water. And funny enough, a lot of the doodads in the map editor have Oasis in their title. So kind of right where your mouse was there by that dark blue water, I tried to make like a little oasis there on the top right of your screen. Um, and so it kind of just led to itself.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. And something else that I noticed here, just now that we're starting off, well, one, that the sunset on a beach theme looks awesome. Like very.
Just wait till you see the first Stormgate. It's in the water and at night. It's great.
That's awesome. So we've got two entrances to the main. I know people felt, people had some pretty strong opinions about this in Boneyard. In the first map pool, like Boneyard was, people felt pretty strong. It's like, well, do we really want to have a main that's wide open to attack from two different avenues? But it looks like you've kind of got a choke here. What's going on here?
Yeah, so you're right. It was controversial to have two entrances. Boneyard, Isle of Dread had it a little bit, and then let's see, Broken Crown too with the tree line. And so, but there were people who liked it. So I wanted to find this happy middle ground where is there a way to modify the way a two entrance situation works, where you take away some of the things that were frustrating. So I made them small, where you can place one barracks in the opening and it fully blocks it. So yeah, perfect.
This one? Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. And so, it's pretty quick and easy to wall off. And then instead of making it just a full line of trees, I like doing it this way because this way it's a choice for the player. And when you build a building, it'll give you vision of the other side of the tree line. So let's say the enemy wants to cheese you or attack you that way. At least you'll know they're there and have some time to react. Whereas if it was a full tree line, you'd get surprised and it's kind of frustrating.
Yeah, I think it was what is it, Broken Crown, where there's like a really thin tree line that goes over into your natural. That's you just have no way of knowing if your enemy's on the other side of it until you mine it down yourself, which is like kind of a chore. It's kind of something you don't want to peel away a worker to do, but if you don't, your opponent's going to show up and like you almost have to set up static D behind that tree line because your opponent's going to try to like flank it or anything like that. I think that leaving this open and letting it be the player's choices, it's kind of nice, actually. I think there needs to be more player choice, like right off the bat, like that, instead of like no one wants to watch an imp or a servo mine out those trees. It's let's let them get right into the action,
Yeah, and you're gonna build the barracks and whatnot anyway, so it doesn't seem to really hinder anything. It just becomes a choice, and you chose to wall off the vertical expand route while maintaining your horizontal expand route, and you can do it the other way around. It's just preference, and and that leads to the whole kind of how do you expand on this map? You're kind of positioned to keep expanding horizontally, to the third even, which is like across the water. Yeah.
So this
That's
would be
not
my
that
third
far
right here.
away. That could be, you could choose to leave that other way walled off. There's also players that just knock down a couple of the trees next to the barracks and take the base, that was vertical instead. I mean, I've seen, over 100 games on this map, and I've seen all kinds of variety. It depends on the player, depends on the play style. I mean, it's pretty cool.
I like it. I also like the fact that I should have done this earlier, like at the very beginning of the game. I've started and I'll die on this hill, but building a structure on the other side of Ethereum, like patch, or I don't know, fountain geyser, whatever you want to call it, so that way the patches start spawning closer to to the command structure is something that I still don't see people do a whole lot, but like I swear it's got to work at least once. Like there's a tiny bit more of a probability that a Ethereum patch will spawn closer to them just because it doesn't have room over on this side, but maybe it's true, maybe
I
it's
never
not.
even thought about that. That's clever.
So tell me more about this map is kind of vertical-ish, but it also looks really big. I've noticed that like the main, the natural, and the triangle third are like they're all not even a quarter of this map, which makes it way bigger than Broken Crown.
Hmm.
What made you think about it's like, well, you can choose about making a big map, a medium map, a small map. Was there just a lot of like geographical features that you wanted to fit in this map, or what led to the
So,
size being what it is?
yeah. Well, funny enough, it was way bigger at one point because this was my very first map, and I just picked a size and kind of went with it. And then when I played games on it, every one of the games turned into minimum 16-minute games because it was just too big. You just couldn't kill the opponent without their own reinforcements eventually winning the day because it was such a long reinforcement distance. When the map is really big for the attacker, it favors the defender too much, and they could always just eventually defend. So we made it a bunch smaller, but I'm still planning on making it smaller. Before we had our call, I was actually tucking in a couple of the bases and kind of pulling everything towards the middle a little bit more. Um, and the main reason I did kind of want a big-ish map was because a lot of the maps are very choky, and I wanted these big open areas where you could battle. So I needed a lot of space for that, but I'm dialing that in a little bit more because it's still a little too big.
Gotcha. Interesting. So, with that, so the bigger maps do tend to have more, how do I say this? Like, it takes so long to get to the opponent's base that, like, the fights tend to be way bigger because you don't want to go and attack with, like, a little tiny force that you know is going to get instantly defeated by the time they get over there. So it kind of seems like it turns into macro games more-ish. You said you've seen a bunch of games being played on this already, which is, I think is great. And this third actually looks very exposed as well. It looks like there's what, one, like an opponent could come down here and attack into the third. They could come through this wellspring over here, down here. It looks like there's all kinds of ways to get after this third.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
so this is actually one of the things I'm working on changing is I'm making it a little bit of a safer base as we speak. And because it was a little too exposed, I felt. But the idea is, the further out you expand, the more ways I want for the attacker to be able to punish it, because you'll have more resources and units to defend as well. And I don't want this to become a slow turtle type situation. If you want to take that third or fourth, however you've expanded, this might be your fourth. In your case, it's your third. I do want it to come at a risk. And at the same time, you've got three pretty safe bases in your corner. They're all on high ground at the start if you want, if you did the triangle expand versus this horizontal pattern. And with that said, it kind of becomes a choice. You take that base out on the map that has some map presence, a little harder to defend, but you're also, more well positioned to pivot off of that and do attacks of your own. Or you play it a little bit slower on the triangle base in the corner and play it safer.
sure. And I like that there's I like this wellspring is close enough to the third where each opponent could like come back and have their own little regen thing, but it's not so tight. It's not so like the avenues of approach are big enough that you can still assault into it, and it's not just like, hey, well, I'm gonna stay here and this is mine forever now because it's infinite regen or whatever. That and your opponent, like let's say I'm coming up from the north, I can just completely circumvent that wellspring and come down here and attack either this triangle third or this triangle third, basically attack all of this all at once and just completely avoid the wellspring instead of like being forced to attack through this. And then like no matter what, not only am I fighting someone that has defender's advantage, but also they're like regenerating the entire time.
Yeah, I think the wellspring placement is a combination of placing it somewhere where players can utilize it without it being, cumbersome to get to or really far out of the way where you're just mispositioning your units, um, while also making it not overbearing. And I think the combination is keeping them somewhat accessible without making them too close to the natural of your opponent, because this is out by the third base, and it's usually at a stage in the game where you've got resources to defend. Now, I also like placing it somewhere where it's not in just the direct path of travel. At the start of the game, if I send a unit directly across the map, I'd prefer it not to interact with that. I want it to be a choice for players to go to it, not an accident as they walk by.
Yeah, let's run a little test real quick and see how long it takes dogs to get to the other side of the map. At 11 minutes exactly, dogs start moving along. Oh, and they get caught behind the Vulcan. No, no.
Maybe it can dash. Maybe it can dash that little palm tree down.
Oh, wait, yeah. Is it? Yeah, they can. Okay, well.
That one too. Yeah, there you go. They're free.
Okay, and we'll start at 11:20. There we go. All right, so let's see what path they take. You're right. They don't like automatically go through the wellspring, which I think is great. Just the fact that you're not forced to go through the wellspring. They do like going through at least one Stormgate in the middle is great. Speaking of Stormgates, I noticed that oh wait, here we are. We're coming up on 11:45. Are they gonna get there? Yeah, let's call it 11:45. So what is that? 25 seconds? 25 seconds for a dog to go from main to main. But it's obviously going to be much shorter than that if you're building if you've got all sorts of production structures over in your naturals, which is cool though. I think that lends itself for I know dogs are fast, pretty fast units, but even then that's plenty to start like launching an attack, and if your opponent sees it coming, they have to react to it. It's not like, oh, they're not going to show up for another 30 seconds. I've got time to just casually throw down like 4 turrets or whatever. It's like, nope, it's a big map, but it still forces the player to react fast enough that it's not just like, hey, I can turtle up and stay here forever.
Yeah, and I've noticed the early game has been pretty action-packed. People like to try things out with that two-way into the base situation, and how do I defend it? How do I punish it? And then I've also seen games that have gone nice and long, where players have played it patient, while still being, pretty action-packed, because I've tried to make sure that at every base, I tell myself, or I ask myself, what is it like to defend this location, and what's it like to attack it? And, do enough, or are there enough options available to both players to reasonably, handle those situations at those base locations?
That is cool. Yeah, there has to be a lot of thought that goes into making a map like this. Not only does it have like this cool swirly whirlpool thing going on for it, like just from a mini-map perspective, but like knowing that like say for instance right here, you made these ramps huge. These are massive ramps. Knowing that someone can't just simply like wall off that ramp without having like so much surface area that like it can't be attacked, that's pretty nice. But there's still a high ground over here, so that this whoever's on this side of it can still get that defender's advantage from the high ground, where it's like, okay, you're not going to see that player's units unless they start shooting.
Right, and this is actually a great location for what I was saying a minute ago. Is so if somebody wants to play it slow and take these 3 bases as their first bases, you'll notice that the ramp, those 2 big ramps, that one right there and the other one to the right that you were just looking at, those are pretty close to each other. You can see them on the same screen, and that makes it pretty easy for the attacker to bounce from ramp to ramp, while the defender has to run around that large body of water or that oasis there, right? And so despite it being high ground and ramps for both bases, the attacker can get from one side to the other faster. And the thought was the defender would have to probably split their army, while the attacker can keep their army in one group like you're doing. And so it really gives both players a way to defend and attack this area. And I thought that was a nice compromise.
Yeah, it is. Like, just thinking about it, I've so spoiler alert for those of you that are watching this video on YouTube. It's this is not our first take of making this. I have my signature audio issues that I had to fix, but in that first take I never noticed just how much surface area of ramp there is. Like, if I try to get all of the ramp space on my screen at once, like that is a lot of ramp space to try and defend for one player. And I think it, like, just even having that in mind, that it's like, well, I don't want defender's advantage to be too big, what can I do to make it so that the defenders aren't like crazily favored over in this little corner area, but giving that huge ramp surface area I think is great, because you're right. If I was over here and I was having to defend, it's like, uh-oh, well, I walled this off and I didn't mine down these trees. Crap, I have to dash through those trees or mine them down or something like that, while my opponent's already here and I'm scrambling to try and defend. So it's nice to see that assaulting up a ramp or assaulting a ramp isn't an automatic, like, hey, you know you're going to be taking catastrophic losses because your opponent built up, and you basically just have to wait for their counterattack to show up, and you're playing this game of ping pong. No, it's actually like, you know what? You can dish out a lot of punishment by being the attacker. It almost, I don't know that it favors the attacker, but I think just this positional advantage of not having to bounce around the Oasis is really cool.
Yeah, and I'm glad you like it. And one of the things that also helps the defender is that the diagonal distance from the main base to the enemy main base is pretty long on this map. And so the reinforcements definitely favor the defender in that area. So yeah, it's a little tricky for the defender to bounce from, have their army split and defend both sides. But again, you've got the rallies and you've got the high ground. So it's been good so far. I haven't seen players having too hard of a time defending. You get a tower, you maybe do one or two production buildings to block off part of the ramp, and you're golden.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. Oh, and speaking of Stormgates, so I noticed there's only 3 Stormgates. Typically, what was it? Edge of Oblivion was one of the first maps with Stormgates on it, and I don't know that it's like standard, but for such a large map, seeing only 3 Stormgates is kind of interesting, because you certainly have enough space for 5 Stormgates, but you only put 3 down. Why is that?
Well, you're right, there is more space, but what I don't like is when there's a Stormgate in the far, let's say, upper left corner of this map, and one in the far bottom right. I just find that frustrating for a player who expanded the other direction. It's just too large of a rush distance for them to get it, where it's either impossible for them to get there in time, or if they commit to that, they're leaving their actual base is crazy exposed because they're wildly out of position at that point. So I tried to keep them a little bit more central by only doing 3 of them, but that's another one of the things that I was literally updating before our call, and you'll see it in the next iteration of this map, as I've moved them inward more. So if you actually just go to one of the outside ones for a second, I can tell you where I've moved it. See that sand barge island thing to the left of it? Pretty much at the top tip of that is where I moved the Stormgate to. Even a little bit more up and to the left from that, actually. I sort of moved the ridge terrain around up there too. But moved it quite, a bit more central. And of course, if you move this one central, you've moved the one on the opposite side of the map central. So I moved them a good chunk closer, and it already feels a lot better when I was looking at it. And so I just want every Stormgate to be reasonably contestable, no matter which direction you decided to expand, because you don't know where it's going to spawn, and a little RNG is nice. There's still an advantage to it being closer to you than further, but it shouldn't be something that you just lose the Stormgate right then and there. I don't like that.
Yeah. And speaking of contestable Stormgates, you've given a lot of like arena space, I would say, on just like all around the Stormgate for armies to come together and start clashing, or to try to like flank each other around. There's not much in the way to like hide an army, but this is the kind of like wide open battlefield where you could see like a lot of AoE spells coming down, a lot of like movement and a lot of micro happening that I think is really cool. It's not so tight in where like, hey, if I don't have my Lancers up front and I don't have my Exos in the back, well, I kind of have to A-move and deal with it because they're not going to be able to maneuver around each other. With this one, I think you've got so much space that you really can position your army however you want, and it turns into like, hey, it's a skill check. Like if you've got the APM and you've got the skill, you've got all the room in the world. Like there's no terrain blocking you from being able to like set up a great gun line, making sure your melee units get to the front. It's I think I haven't seen any matches on this map yet, but I think it would lead itself to really big, really like epic fights where people can really show off their skill as much as they want to.
Oh yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Those areas I intentionally kept open because I wanted big fights at the Stormgate. Those are points of contention, and you really want to fight there typically. And so I have seen really huge concaves from players, right? Like from one side of the screen almost to the other. And it's really cool seeing the micro packs of units back and forward and just kind of play around that. And the Stormgates, they aggro just by A moving anywhere near it. And so that's still going to happen to some degree, but I didn't want that to catch like half your army. I want you to be able to move away from it a little bit and fight your opponent without it just, I don't know, it's a little frustrating sometimes when it catches your army. And yeah, and that is one of the reasons this map is as big as it is. And like I said, I'm making it smaller. It's probably going to decrease by about 10%, I'd say, at least on this next iteration. And that's because I feel a lot of the maps that we have right now are very choky. Stormgate has 300 max supply compared to, let's say, StarCraft with 200. So the armies are bigger. There's more units, and I think making things too choky is very counterintuitive to that. And so I want these big battles. I want these epic, I don't want half my units stuck behind the other half. Give me some space to fight.
Yeah, and big maps certainly let you do that. So talk to me about, speaking of different like terrain features and such. I noticed that I think it's these trees, and there might be a few like extra little doodads and stuff, but these trees look like most of the destructible terrain. Almost everything else is pretty solid cliffs
Yep.
or features that like you really can't do much to interact with. Is that an intentional thing, or is that like a, hey, I want these lanes set in stone, like this is how the map is meant to be played? What was the thought process making like not as much destructible terrain?
Well, you're right. There isn't that much, and the reason for it is, first I wanted clarity, right? So palm trees, you can destroy them. The other trees you can't, and that's pretty. You find that out pretty quick when you play, and it's the same everywhere on this map. So it's quick and easy to understand. I also did want to make sure I provided some palm trees because you need spots for scanners, and you want a little bit of destructible terrain. Give the players a little bit of control. At the same time, I think a lot of maps have too much of the trees, and this is a very personal thing. I'm not saying this makes a map good or bad, but for me, I don't want large areas being fully blocked off by trees, because only certain units can break trees, and you might not have them in your comp. And yes, you can send workers, but that's kind of annoying because you want them mining. And so I didn't want to restrict a player to that level. And it's cool to give player options because, with like things like tree lines that you have to break down, because it creates innovation and originality and just dynamic gameplay. At the same time, if you give a player a million choices, then the defender has to know how to defend a million things. And I think finding that Goldilocks zone with give players options and some feel that they get to decide how to play the map while also sort of limiting it in certain ways too, I think that's where you hit the sweet spot.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for not I don't know, it's not Burger King. If you want to play a big map that has like a billion different routes in, like you almost know for a certainty that you're not going to see an attack coming, or they're going to take some route, or they're going to be able to mine some really obscure way. Like, you don't want to fill the entire map with trees and just say, oh, it's the most customizable freeform player choice map ever. Like, that's not really fun. I think putting the rails down a little bit harder can make for a map where it's like, the philosophy almost feels like, you know what? Here's your tools. Here's what you've got to play with. Is it as much as other maps? No, but I like the fact that how do I word this? Forcing players to make do with what they've got, where it's like, hey, you don't have a choice about like how big of an opening, like you don't really have much of a choice of how big you want the opening into the main to be. It's 2 barracks wide, it's 1 barracks wide, or 2 if you want to mine down those trees, kind of a thing. It's very like, it keeps the action focused on like what the player's doing and not so much on like, well, do they want to do this, do they not? Like keeping the choices a little bit limited, but not so limited that it's not interesting.
Right. And it's obviously very subjective on exactly what accomplishes that, but that's what I'm going for. And I'm I'm still getting feedback from people, and I'm still making changes to the map. So, it's a kind of ongoing process, but I like it, and I think I've done a decent job getting it to a reasonable place.
No, I agree. I think this is absolutely beautiful. And I like that there's these double luminites is pretty interesting too. Have you seen this map get mined out before?
Yep. It takes a little while, but I have seen it. Those would be like the 20-minute plus games. But yeah, I have seen it, and those are pretty crazy for sure. And again, this map has got a lot of open space, so those late game battles are no problem on this map, and they're really fun. And yeah, it's still a little big. I'm still gonna tuck some stuff in and reduce it a little, but I definitely want to keep that feel of giving people the players or giving players the ability to have those big epic battles without units getting caught on each other on terrain, because that's just kind of a feels bad.
Have you noticed any kind of, and you talked about this a little bit before, that some races have access, a little bit easier access to tree clearing capabilities, like having an atlas that can just white or a stompy boy. I forget what they're actually called
Magmadon?
sometimes. Magmadons, yeah. I just call them
Yeah.
stompy boys. Um, Having Magmadons that can just like, all right, you hit the ability button and you just like right click until the trees are down. That is way simpler than having a saber that has to shoot things down. What other are there other like racial considerations that you had to think about while you were making this map?
Yeah, that's a little bit of it right there. Is that sabers are like they are single target trees. Yeah, they got their little splash damage, but it's pretty cumbersome versus a Magmadon or a Vulcan where you can just dash through a line of trees. At the same time, I just don't want to force players to have to build certain units in their comp just because there's a line of trees on the map. Like, let's say I didn't want to build Vulcan, then I'm playing Bio or whatever. I don't want to make players and their certain play style, less good or convenient on a map. I don't like. I want players to have options, and I don't want to limit them in that way. There's always ways you can limit players with terrain and this and that, but I didn't want to do that.
Yeah. Cool. That's very cool. I also noticed that there's this cool little like this little back alleyway where there's still a little bit of vision obscurity where it's like, oh, if you sneak past someone's natural with like a couple of transports or something like that, you still have enough dead space in here to like show up in the main and be like surprise, or
Yep.
or like, I mean, these definitely look like they're destructible, so you can open things up and throw down tech buildings or static
Yeah,
D or
that's
whatever. Like, there's still plenty to play with here. If it sounds like I'm knocking on your idea to have not much destructible terrain, please don't take it like that. I really like
no,
where it's
no.
at.
No, I didn't take it that way one bit. I like the question. You're making me think more about it, which is always good. And so, one of the things that players might not know is that map editors have the ability to control the unit bound and the camera bound. So, although you can see all that water off the edge of the map, your air units can't actually go all the way to the bottom left of your screen here. Map players can limit that. So, your air unit will just kind of hit an invisible wall. And yeah, perfect. Yeah, go ahead and try it. And I've done that around the perimeter and also on the top left and bottom right. See, they'll kind of stop right there. See that? And that's because I don't
Oh,
want players to go all the way out there with an arc ship or something annoying. I wanted the ability to have ground units still be in range to shoot at them. There's a couple sweet spots, but there should be. But if you're gonna have like 10 hornets, they won't all fit.
yeah.
And so yeah, and so for example, the very top left and bottom right of the map, you can see all that water. But don't worry, your unit, like if you go to the top left of the mini map, Frank, for a second, or yeah, see, like no, don't worry, they can't go all the way out there. Is what I'm trying to say. They can only go a little bit past the edge of the map. It's just the fact that the map has to be shaped like this. And as I mentioned, I've made the map smaller, and tucking those corners in was one way, but the mini map has to be a rectangle. So
Sure, sure. Yeah, and I've also noticed that where was it here? This is kind of interesting. I wonder, like, okay, so you put this rock here. Is that so people can like hide a force right here if a Stormgate comes up and then suddenly it's like surprise and it's flanking from a couple different directions at once, or this
yeah, it's a
terrain
little
feature
bit
is
of
pretty
what.
interesting.
It's a little bit of kind of however you want to use it. I've seen players just use that as extra space to kite back to and buy themselves time while still maintaining like being on the low ground there. And then their reinforcements can come because you can go around it. I've seen players trap others down there. I've seen a variety of things. Yeah, I kind of like what you were saying, where a player could, sort of move a force back there or part of it, and then in the middle of the fight, yeah, you got a good flank. I've seen some creative stuff there. I think there might be a little too much space, but as I keep making the map smaller, I'm sure I'll tuck that in a little too.
Yeah, I'm a huge sucker for like weirdly creative plays. Now I know a lot of people are big fans of like, oh well, you gotta play the game as it's designed, and people that are executing build orders and pulling off sick micro is fun to watch. But for me personally, I like seeing creative little ideas where it's like, oh, they hit like five hedgehogs over here, and like as they were kiting back towards their third, someone like their hedgehogs come out, they attack, and yeah, like to just see how that changes the fight.
Yeah, I've seen that with Kree as well. That's a good unit for that. And if you look at the middle of the map, it's got a couple little moments like that. So if you go to that middle Stormgate for a second, Frank, you'll see that little body of water there on top of your screen, and there's one below it. That's got little flank angles too. So they're nearby, and you'll notice that those I did as the water instead of the high ground cliffs. And so you might ask, why sometimes divide the map with the water, and why do you sometimes do it with the high ground? Well, one blocks the vision and other doesn't. So, and that's a really good thing to keep in consideration. So, do you want to actually go to the main base for a quick second?
Sure.
So see how that's the Oasis that divides those two naturals. Think about that. If that was high ground, you wouldn't get vision, and that would be really annoying if there was an air unit. This way, you can still see across the body of water, but your units have to go around it.
Oh, I like that. And actually, like putting static D on either side of this too would make it a little bit like, let's say this is your third. Say the opponent comes by, they wipe out your third. That's a bummer. But you can still have, I don't know, a shroud stone there, or a turret, or some kind of static D that can still like be shooting over here and still be a threat, or even setting up like siege units over on this side.
Yep.
Where it's like, okay, yes, you got an expansion, but if you really want to take out someone's main, it's going to take a long time, or it's going to be a bit of a slog.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned the siege unit because I have seen some really cool battles from one side of this body of water with Saber and Atlas and stuff, and man, it just looked so cool. Honestly, I really enjoyed that moment.
Very cool. All right, well, cool, man. I'm loving how much attention to detail and how many like considerations went into this map. What else? Oh, we didn't talk about this little alleyway yet. This little
Yeah.
alleyway around the third. Tell us.
Yeah, it's just another flank angle, and I keep saying it, but it's one of the areas I'm modifying a little bit. There's a lot of space back there, so I'm just tucking it in and bringing things in. But yeah, I want players to have ways to attack. I want, while finding that sweet spot of like players still being able to defend. This one's pretty hard to defend. This base that you're kind of hovering around, I'm making that easier to defend. It's just a bit much, but I kind of like to start at one point and dial it in little by little, and eventually, it seems to hit that sweet spot.
Sure. Yeah. And speaking of high ground, low ground, there's two levels on this map, right?
Right, right. Yep. There's only two. I'll call it playable levels. They're the areas that have the little trees and the green cliffs. Those are you can't put units there ever. Everywhere else it's the either the sand or the water, right? And yeah, it's just two terrains. So where you're seeing sand coming out of the water, that's just the same height, just the terrain being raised a little bit, not actually a cliff height, if you will. Whereas your main base has the ramps that come down. That's actually high ground. So yep, it's just a two height map. Pretty straightforward in that way. The I'm working on another map in the background, and that one is much more focused on high ground, low ground interaction. But this map's pretty straightforward on that one.
Nice, nice. And so I can't imagine how long it would take to make a map like this. How many project hours do you think you've put into this already?
For this one, probably somewhere between 100 or 200 hours. It's hard for me to dial it in. I didn't track it, but a lot of that was me learning the program. I'd never used it before. I never made maps in video games before or anything. So,
Oh, you're not
there was
you're
a
not
big
like a
learning
holdover
curve.
from Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2, like you started making maps with Stormgate?
Yeah, this was my very first time.
Dang.
Um, and I just had some things that, like I said, I wanted more open maps, so I just kind of wanted to get my hands on it and do it myself. And, I had a lot of help. People taught me a lot about, oh, you can make this prettier here. I had so many suggestions from other map makers. Like, this map is far, like, I did the work, but the amount of input, you could almost call it a community map at this point, honestly.
That's awesome. Well, very cool, man. Well, thank you so much for putting all this work in. I know a lot of people like to, you know, they talk about 10,000 hours it takes to become a great player, and how long does it take to pull off like this perfect build order or whatever. But I think map makers don't get enough credit for how much work goes into actually making the maps that these that players are playing on. So 200 hours is wild, dude. Like, and if that's like 5 work weeks, literally 5 work weeks. If I was told, hey, make a single map and you have a month and a week to do it, I would be like, my jaw would hit the floor. I would not be able to turn something out like this. But yeah, I'm excited to see a lot of games played on it. Excited to see what other maps you're making too. That's it's great to see that, like, this isn't just your crowning jewel and that's going to be it. Sounds like you got bit by the bug and you're going to be having some more maps coming out. And yeah, I think we're all gonna look forward to seeing those maps played either in customs, possibly on ladder. But yeah, man, thanks so much for putting all this work in.
Oh, thanks for doing this little interview video. I think it's super cool. I think it's great chance to kind of get to explain my thoughts on the map and help players familiarize themselves with the map and hopefully enjoy the map.
Definitely. All right, well, thanks so much for hopping on the call, man. We're that's gonna be it for this map tour, and just the way that like the sunset light hits the sand is very cinematic for me. Anyway, I'm gonna stop gushing now.
Now I want to go on vacation.
Yeah, right. It's only December. Anyway, all right, that's gonna be it for this map tour. Thank you so much for coming around, and we will see you guys later.